as this. So what we might think, okay, to begin with, is that on this first bullet point, right, plausibly, the T hypothesis is the conjunction of two claims, right? It's the claim that there's an omnipotent being, right? So there's something that has, you know, all power. The way that Swinburne put it was that he's responsible for every contingent thing coming into existence, right? You have to have basically all power to be able to do that. And as well as that, the particular omnipotent being that we're talking about desires for L to come about, right? Desires for it to be the case that there's a life-permitting universe, right? But then, now if we move on to the second bullet point, what happens, it seems to me, on the conjunction of those two propositions is, yeah, sure, the probability that the universe would be life-permitting conditional on this theism hypothesis is actually 1, right? It kind of logically entails that there would be a life-permitting universe. And the reason is that, look, an omnipotent being can't fail, right? There's no way that it can fail. That's just what it means, right? There's nothing could get in its way, and it's like, oh, it's tripped up on its way to making the universe and forgot or something. Like, an omnipotent being is kind of successful by definition in what it tries to do. But it makes you think maybe you should be suspicious here. I mean, like, the probability wasn't just higher than on naturalism. It's like jumped all the way to 1, right? Maximally certain. And there's something kind of weird about that. It seems to me you could do that with anything, right? I mean, let's say I flip a coin, the coin lands heads. I mean, let's compare the conditional hypotheses like we were doing before. I mean, yeah, I guess on the hypothesis that the coin is just fair or something, I mean, what's the probability that it would land heads? I mean, 50-50, right? So I would say, you know, I'm kind of moderately surprised, not particularly surprised, right, when it comes up. I'm going to give that probability of like 0.5. But now if we put the same evidence, conditionalize it on the hypothesis that there's a being who's omnipotent and desires above all else that this coin would land heads, again, because an omnipotent being can't fail at making things come about that it wants to come about, the probability that it would land heads is 1, right? So if we were to just run the argument that we looked at a minute ago, you'd think, well, every time I flip a coin, I should always conclude that there's an omnipotent being who desired for the coin to show exactly that, right? The likelihood principle makes me prefer that hypothesis to the one that says it just happened by chance, right? It just feels like, you know, on the one hand, I feel like, am I rationally obliged every time something chancy happens to conclude that there's an omnipotent agent that made that happen? That seems wrong, right? But also, there's something kind of weird and ad hoc about this. I mean, yeah, if I watch the coin and it lands heads, and then I kind of come up with a hypothesis, which is there's a being who wants exactly that to happen, that makes the probability go to 1, right? But it's ad hoc in the sense that, like, I can't make any predictions with that. I have to see the coin land first before I can do the calculation and figure out that it has probability 1. I mean, if I said in advance, I'd have to remain agnostic as to whether there's going to be an omnipotent being that wants to see heads or an omnipotent being that wants to see tails, right? And it doesn't help me make any predictions, right? I'm in just the same position as I would be on the chance hypothesis. So while this process can kind of generate an argument that looks like the fine-tuning argument, we're obviously doing things backwards, right? I'm firing an arrow at a tree, and then I'm painting the target around wherever it was that the arrow happened to land, right? And then claiming that I got a bullseye, right? So it's ad hoc, and the argument's trivial, right? It's not interesting. Doesn't matter what goes in this first slot, right? With the right T hypothesis, I can make the number here show 1, whatever's going on, right? So it's just kind of not interesting. That can't be what, something has to change here, it seems to me. So you might think, well, look, the T hypothesis had two parts to it. All we had was 2 parts. It's on omnipotent being, kind of needs to be that. And then it was the bit about the desires, right? We painted that on afterwards around the target. Well, let's just get rid of it. Let's see what happens if we just get rid of it. Well, it seems to me now on the theistic hypothesis is just there's an omnipotent being, right? But we're not saying anything about what he desires. I don't see why that hypothesis raises the probability that the universe would be life permitting. I mean, for all I know, that an omnipotent being could want anything, right? He could just want there to be black holes. He could just want there to be no universes at all, right? He could just want to be the only thing that exists. He might just want to end his own existence. I don't know, who knows, right? If we take the desires out, it doesn't help in any sense to just posit that there's an omnipotent being. That's the point. So if that's the hypothesis, it's actually equal to pure chance. It's the same as pure chance, right? So this is the Goldilocks hypothesis problem: is if you pack in too much into the theistic hypothesis, then yeah, so it kind of does the work it needs to do, but in a way that feels ad hoc and unnatural and uninteresting. And then if you take away what seemed to be making it ad hoc and uninteresting, then we slam right from one, but right back down to exactly the same probability as we got under naturalism.